From JBS Studios in Greater New York, this is the JBS News Update with Teisha Bader.
I'm Teisha Bader with the JBS News Update for Wednesday, September the 4th, 2024. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke to the foreign press in English this evening, addressing the brutal execution of the 6 Israeli hostages who were kidnapped during the Hamas massacre on October the 7th and held captive by Hamas, whose remains were recovered by the IDF this past Saturday night. Netanyahu saying he met with some of the family members of the slain hostages in the last few days, sharing regret that Israeli troops were not able to get to their loved ones sooner while they were still alive.
I said to them that I'm sorry. I apologize that we didn't get them out. We worked so hard to get them. We were close, but we didn't. And they changed the torment. Our families worried about their loved ones, to families grieving for their fallen beloved. That sentiment I know, because I belong to that family, but it's a horror.
The Prime Minister reiterated that Hamas will pay a heavy price for the brutal murders and reiterated the 3 goals of the war with Hamas: the return of all the hostages, destroying Hamas's military capability, and ensuring that Gaza does not become a threat to Israel anymore. Netanyahu said a critical part was the Philadelphia corridor, the border between the Gaza Strip and Egypt, remaining under firm control to prevent further arms from entering Gaza. The United States Justice Department yesterday announced criminal charges of terrorism, murder conspiracy, and sanctions evasion against 3 senior leaders of terror group Hamas related to their central roles in planning, supporting, and perpetrating the terrorist atrocities of October the 7th. Here's U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland speaking yesterday.
Today, the Justice Department unsealed charges against Yahya Sinwar and other senior leaders of Hamas for financing and directing a decades-long campaign to murder American citizens and endanger the security of the United States. As outlined in our complaint, those defendants, armed with weapons, political support, and funding from the government of Iran and support from Hezbollah, have led Hamas's efforts to destroy the state of Israel and murder civilians in support of that aim. On October 7th, Hamas terrorists murdered nearly 1,200 people, including over 40 Americans, and kidnapped hundreds of civilians. They perpetrated the deadliest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. This weekend, we learned that Hamas murdered 6 more hostages, including Hirsch Goldberg Poland, a 23-year-old Israeli American.
Garland said the department was investigating the murder of Hirsch Goldberg Poland and each and every one of the brutal murders of Americans as acts of terrorism, and that the charges were just one part of the department's effort to target every aspect of Hamas's operations. Garland saying these actions will not be the last.
We will continue to support the whole-of-government effort to bring the Americans still being held hostage home.
Northern Israel came under heavy barrages of rocket fire today from terror group Hezbollah. The IDF said over 65 projectiles were fired from Lebanese territory, crossing into northern Israel. Some of them were intercepted, some fell in open areas, but some did make impact, including one rocket that hit a home in Kiryat Shmona, causing significant damage. No injuries were reported in the barrages. The IDF struck Hezbollah terrorists in Lebanon in response. Counter-terror operations also continue in the West Bank this week, where the IDF said today that it eliminated 2 armed terrorists in an exchange of fire in the Tulkarem area, adding that Israeli forces located weapons in the area and found a bomb placed inside an empty children's stroller. Also noting during the operation that an explosives laboratory was found, and that earlier this week Israeli aircraft hit a terrorist squad shortly after they were identified throwing explosives and shooting at IDF forces. The IDF also gave an update on operations in Gaza. In recent weeks, it said over 200 terrorists were eliminated in the area of Tal Sultan in Rafah. Dozens of weapons have been found in civilian homes and locations, and rocket launchers have also been discovered. Well, a national vigil for the murdered hostages was held last night at Congregation Adas Israel in Washington. Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff joined hostage families as well as Jewish leaders from the American Jewish Committee, the Anti-Defamation League, the Jewish Community Relations Council, federations, and more, saying he felt gutted by the news this weekend. Emhoff telling the congregants, "While I'm here as the Second Gentleman of the United States, in this moment I'm here as a congregant, as a mourner, as a Jew who feels connected to all of you." He said, as the president and vice president have said, Hamas is responsible for killing Hirsch, Ori, Carmel, Alexander, Almog, Eden, and too many others. And Hamas's leaders will pay for these crimes. Emhoff saying that President Biden and Vice President Harris are working around the clock to get a hostage and ceasefire deal done. CEO of the American Jewish Committee, Ted Deutsch, introduced Emhoff last night and posed the question, which he said, as we mourn the murdered hostages, is being asked in Jewish homes, synagogues, and communities across America. Where is the outrage?
Where is the collective, universal, and unequivocal condemnation for the brutal murder of an innocent American citizen at the hands of a terrorist? And why, in a world that so often rallies for justice, have the deaths of 6 innocents, the execution of 6 innocent souls by terrorists, not provoked the outcry it so desperately and rightfully deserves?
Taking a look now at our programming for tonight on JBS for Wednesday, September the 4th at 7 o'clock. David Harris is joined by General Retired Amos Yadlin to discuss the evolving geopolitics and strategic landscape of Israel and the Middle East since October the 7th. At 7:30, Shahar Azani speaks with Laureen Lipsky about the Zionist education initiative she founded, Taking Back the Narrative. That's also coming up at 10. At 8, FIDF CEO Steve Weil is joined by 3 soldiers from the IDF Spokesperson's unit as they share their personal stories, discuss their families, and recount their experiences on October the 7th and beyond. At 9, Esther Waxman is on L'chaim. At 10:30, an encore of the news. And coming up next, it's Thinking Out Loud. And that's the JBS News Update for Wednesday, September the 4th, 2024. I'm Teisha Bader. Am Yisrael Chai.